From the chute to the glory, every ride tells a story. Let's see who's riding theirs tonight. Welcome back to Dirt and Glory. This past weekend, PBR teams went to Duluth, Georgia for one of two neutral site events this season. To recap this two-day event, I will talk about key matchups, rides, wrecks, and more. But let's start off with a couple of quick updates. Brady Fielder from the Texas Rattlers broke his leg this past week at the last Cowboy Standing event. He's going to be out for at least a couple months. The New York Mavericks acquired seasoned rider Bob Mitchell, and that is something that a veteran presence will definitely help along with Mason Taylor to this young team and help them get the ball rolling. Kaique Pacheco from the Austin Gamblers will be out an additional 4 to 8 weeks for the fractured finger on his writing hand. All right, let's get into it. Day 1, Saturday. Game 1 was the Nashville Stampede versus the Oklahoma Wildcatters. Alan DeSosa started off the game for Nashville strong when he went for 8 on Bucking Bill for 84.5 points. Oklahoma's Court McFadden quickly entered Nashville when he faced Bueno for a rematch and managed to ride this bull again for a score of 86.5 points. Caden Loud could have clinched the game for Nashville with a couple outs left, but Bex's red eye won the rematch and kicked Caden as he was on his way to the ground. Nashville won this game 2-1 with a score of 171.25 to 86.5 points. Game 2, the Texas Rattlers versus the Florida Freedom. This game had a lot of drama in it, with Florida's Joao Lucas Campos taking a huge shot to the chest with both of Down Payment's hooves. And with the coach's challenge towards the end of the game, this was a great game, and as much as I'd love to share all the rides, we are just going to focus on a couple. Texas's Claudio Montaño Jr. faced a bull that he had ridden several times before. That did not stop Saturday. Claudio rode Mike's Motive for a score of 87.25 points, which got Texas on the board early. Florida's final ride was John Crimber, who rode Still Flying Crazy for 87.5 points. This put Florida ahead and put the ball in Texas's court. Brady Randolph had a walk-off win against There's Your Sign with a score of 85.25 points to clinch the game for Texas. Texas won this game 3-2 with a score of 258 to 173.5 points. Game 3, the Missouri Thunder versus the New York Mavericks. Bob Mitchell changed the tide for the New York Mavericks when he conquered lights out for 87.75 points, which gave the Mavericks their first qualified ride of the PBR team season. Mauricio Moreira also showed up for the Mavericks by riding Napoleon for 86 points. The Mavericks ended up with a win 2-1 with a final score of 173.75 points to 87.25 points for their first win of the PBR team season. Game 4, the Arizona Ridge Riders versus the Austin Gamblers. The Ridge Riders came out very aggressive in this game, and they started it out with a qualified ride from Everton Natone da Silva versus Rogue One for a score of 82.25 points. Dalton Castle's ride on Smokestack kept Austin alive in this game with a high score of 89.5 points. Keyshawn Whitehorse had a little bit of drama in his ride. When the clock stopped at 2.68 seconds, while he was aboard Eyes on Me, Arizona challenged the ride and won the challenge. Keyshawn was awarded 90 points, which clinched the game for Arizona. Arizona ended up with the win, 3-1, with a score of 257.75 to 89.5 points. Game 5, the Carolina Cowboys versus the Kansas City Outlaws. This game also had a little bit of drama, with a bull acting pretty rowdy in the chutes, a coach's challenge, and at the end, 2 riders getting swapped out because the game had been clinched early. Macon Calixton Rocha got the first official score of the game aboard Damaged Goods for 87.75 points for the Outlaws. 2022 PBR World Champion Dalen Swearden faced Hoka Hay and won the game for Carolina with still a couple more outs left with a score of 87 points. Carolina got the win 3-1 with a final score of 256.5 points to 87.75. Day 2. The first game of the day was the New York Mavericks versus the Oklahoma City Wildcatters. Day 2 started off with a duel and a lot of drama in this matchup. Court McFadden started the game off with a qualified ride aboard Down Payment with a score of 88 points. Mason Taylor had some drama with dirty deeds in the chute and ended up getting disqualified. However, the judge actually said that since Mason got injured, they could get another rider. But unfortunately, New York had to decline because they didn't have another rider to use. They just came to the event with their starting 5. Drama continued to unfold when Kyler Oliver was on the Kraken and had the clock stop early. Naturally, OKC's coach, JB Mooney, challenged that there was no touch, and they won the challenge and was awarded a score of 87.25 points. Oklahoma, by 1 point, got their first win of the season, 2-2, with a final score of 175.25 to 174.25. Game 2, the battle for the Texas Cup. The Texas Rattlers versus the Austin Gamblers. The first 4 riders in this matchup got a qualified road, and that showed the depths of this in-state rivalry. Claudio Montaño Jr. finally got redemption his rematch against Ruthless, which he rode him for 85.5 points. Ezekiel Mitchell clinched the win for Texas with a ride of 87.75 points aboard Say When. Texas ended the weekend perfect, riding 4 for 3 in this game with a final score of 342.5 points to 253.75 points. Game 3, the Carolina Cowboys versus the Missouri Thunder. Missouri's Boudreaux Campbell went 2 for 2 this weekend aboard Trigger Happy with a score of 86.5 points. Dalen Swearigan had quite the wreck on Project X, but the Bullfighters did a great job in protecting him, and with some assistance, he was able to walk out of the arena. Clay Guyton tried for the win for Carolina when he rode Barstool for 82.5 points. However, it just wasn't enough to seal the deal. Missouri ended up with a win 2-2 with a final score of 172.25 points to 168. Game 4, the Nashville Stampede versus the Florida Freedom. If we had to talk about a team that showed up and showed out this weekend, Florida is on the top of that list. Joao Lucas Campos got redemption on his rematch versus Mike's Motive when he conquered him for 87.5 points. Nashville's newest rider, Damian Soares, not only had his first qualified ride riding for the Stampede, but he also had his first ride in America as he flew for the first time ever to America to be part of the Nashville Stampede. He rode lights out for a score of 89.25 points. John Crimber ended the game aboard Sweet Action with a score of 87.75 points to give Florida their first perfect game ever and only the 7th ever in PBR team's history. Florida commanded the win 5-2 with a score of 410.5 points to 177.5. Game 5, the Kansas City Outlaws versus the Arizona Ridge Riders. Kansas City started out the game strong with Colton Hevelo rode What's Poppin' for 87 points. The Ridge Riders sent out Luciano de Castro aboard Alakazoo for 87.25 points to win the game, and he also got his first ever walk-off win. Kansas City did challenge to ride for a slap, but they lost the challenge, and that didn't end up changing the outcome of the game. Arizona ended up with the win 2-1 with a final score of 171-87. Okay, let's do a quick rundown and highlight of the entire weekend. The Texas Rattlers and the Arizona Ridge Riders are the only teams to be perfect this weekend and go undefeated. They are both now 4-1 in the season, with Texas ahead by 467.75 points. Keyshawn Whitehorse was the Day 1 MVP, Damian Soares was the Day 2 MVP, and Jago and Hubastang shared the bull of the event with an average score of 44.5. 7 riders went 2 for 2 this weekend. That's truly incredible. And one thing I want to point out is that New York needs depth. If they would have been able to replace Mason Taylor when he got injured, they would have been given the opportunity for another ride, and that could have won them the game if their substituted rider would have made the 8. Next weekend, we will be in Sunrise, Florida for Freedom Days. Make sure you stay tuned for that recap after that event. Don't forget to please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, go ahead, hit that little bell so you can get notifications every time a new video drops. It's not just about the 8 seconds, it's about the courage, the commitment, and the grit. Until next time, this is Dirt and Glory.